The screams of a woman echoed through the stillness of dawn, carrying across the sleeping town of Silverton, Colorado like a banshee's wail. Brock Daniels, who'd been camping on the outskirts after a long cattle drive, jolted awake, his hand instinctively reaching for the Colt revolver beside his bedroll. It was 1876, a time when the West was still wild and lawless, and such sounds rarely meant anything good. The 30-year-old cowboy rose swiftly, pulling on his boots and hat. His ranch hands were still sleeping soundly, exhausted from driving 300 head of cattle from Wyoming down to Colorado. Brock's instincts, honed by years on the frontier, told him someone needed help. He mounted his gray stallion without saddling him, using just a bridle, and rode toward the direction of the cries. The sound led him to a dilapidated barn on the edge of a seemingly abandoned homestead about a mile from town. The weathered structure leaned precariously, its red paint peeling away like scabs from an old wound. The screaming had stopped, replaced by muffled sobbing that raised the hair on Brock's neck. Drawing his revolver, he approached cautiously. Years of surviving in the unforgiving West had taught him to be wary. He tied his horse to a post and pushed open the barn door, wincing at the loud creak that announced his presence. "Hello?" he called out, his voice even despite the tension in his chest. "Anyone in here?" The sobbing halted abruptly, followed by the distinct sound of chains rattling. Brock moved deeper into the barn, his eyes adjusting to the dim light filtering through cracks in the walls. What he saw next made his blood run cold. A woman was chained to a wooden post in the back of the barn. Her wrists were raw and bleeding from the tight iron shackles. Her dress, once white, was now stained with dirt and what appeared to be blood. Her long auburn hair hung in matted tangles around her face, partially obscuring features that, even in such a state, Brock could tell were striking. "Dear God," he whispered, holstering his weapon and rushing toward her. Her green eyes widened in terror as he approached, and she pressed herself against the post, as if trying to disappear into the wood. "Stay back," she warned, her voice hoarse from screaming. "If he finds you here, he'll kill us both." "Who?" Brock asked, kneeling before her, taking care to move slowly. "Who did this to you?" "Vernon Blackley." She spat the name like poison. "My stepfather's business partner. They owed him money, so he took me as payment." Her voice cracked. "Said he'd keep me until my stepfather paid his debts. That was 3 weeks ago." Brock's jaw tightened, fury coursing through him. He'd heard stories of Blackley, a wealthy rancher with political connections and a reputation for cruelty. The law wouldn't touch him. Too many officials were in his pocket. "What's your name?" he asked, examining the chains. "Katherine Zimmer," she answered, watching him warily. "Most people call me Kate." "I'm Brock Daniels," he replied, meeting her gaze. "And I'm going to get you out of here, Miss Zimmer." He stood and looked around the barn, spotting an axe leaning against a wall. He grabbed it and returned to Kate, who was watching him with a mixture of hope and fear. "Hold still," he instructed, positioning the axe blade between 2 links of the chain. With a powerful swing, he brought the axe down. The first strike barely dented the metal. The second created a small crack. By the 5th swing, sweat pouring down his face, the link finally broke apart. He continued methodically, breaking each link of the chain until Kate was free from the post, though the shackles remained on her wrists. She rubbed her arms, wincing at the pain from her raw skin. "We need to find a blacksmith to remove these properly," Brock said, gently examining the shackles. Kate suddenly tensed, her eyes fixed on something behind him. "He's coming," she whispered, terror evident in her voice. Brock turned to see a lantern's glow approaching the barn. "Stay behind me," he instructed, helping Kate to her feet. They moved toward the back of the barn, where Brock had spotted a small door, likely used for throwing out hay. He pushed it open, letting in the gray light of early morning. "Can you run?" he asked. Kate nodded determinedly. "I've been saving my strength. My horse is at the front. We'll have to circle around," he explained quietly, helping her through the opening. They crept along the back of the barn, the sound of the front door being thrown open spurring them to move faster. As they rounded the corner, Brock's gray stallion came into view, pawing at the ground nervously. "Up you go," Brock said, boosting Kate onto the horse's back before mounting behind her. "Hold on tight." As they galloped away, a shot rang out, the bullet whistling past them. Brock leaned forward, shielding Kate with his body as he urged the horse faster. Behind them, Blackley was shouting obscenities and threats. "Never again," Brock growled. The words meant both as a promise to Kate and a warning to the man they were leaving behind. "He'll never lay a hand on you again." They rode hard until they reached a small creek where Brock had been camping with his men. The other cowboys were already awake, looking alarmed at the sight of their boss returning with a chained woman. "Boss?" his foreman Jesse called out, hand hovering near his gun. "This is Miss Katherine Zimmer," Brock explained as he dismounted and helped Kate down. "She was being held captive by Vernon Blackley. We need to get these chains off her and then put as much distance between us and Silverton as possible." The men exchanged glances. Everyone knew Blackley's reputation. "There's a blacksmith in Brighton," Jesse suggested. "About 20 miles north." Brock nodded. "We'll head there, pack up camp. We're moving out in 10 minutes. While the men scrambled to break down the camp, Brock led Kate to the creek. "You can clean up a bit if you'd like," he offered, respectfully turning his back to give her privacy. Kate knelt by the water's edge, the chains clinking as she splashed water on her face and neck. "Why are you helping me?" she asked quietly. "You don't know me." Blackley has powerful friends. Brock remained facing away from her, his voice low and certain. "Some things are just right or wrong, Miss Zimmer. What was done to you was wrong. Simple as that." Kate was silent for a moment. "Thank you," she finally said, her voice barely audible over the burbling creek. "We'll get you somewhere safe," Brock promised. "And those chains off. Then we can figure out what comes next." An hour later, they were traveling north, Kate riding double with Brock while the ranch hands drove the cattle. She sat stiffly at first, uncomfortable with the proximity to a man she'd just met. But as the miles passed and her exhaustion grew, she found herself leaning back against his solid chest, drawing comfort from his steady presence. By midday, they reached Brighton, a small but growing town with a proper main street lined with businesses. Brock led the group to the blacksmith's shop, a sturdy brick building with smoke billowing from its chimney. The blacksmith, a burly man named Hiram, looked up in surprise as Brock entered with Kate, whose wrists were still bound by the heavy iron shackles. "Need some assistance," Brock said simply, nodding toward Kate's restraints. Hiram's eyes widened, but he asked no questions. "Bring her over here," he instructed, gesturing to his workbench. Kate sat nervously as the blacksmith examined the shackles. "Crude work," he muttered, "but effective. I'll need to cut through them carefully." Using a series of fine chisels and a small saw, Hiram worked methodically to free Kate without harming her already injured wrists. When the first shackle fell away, she gasped in relief, tears filling her eyes as she rubbed her raw skin. "Thank you," she whispered as the second shackle clattered to the floor. Hiram nodded gruffly. "Don't mention it." He looked at Brock. "You in some kind of trouble?" Brock's expression remained neutral. "The kind that might follow us. We'd appreciate your discretion." The blacksmith nodded understanding. "Never saw you, either of you." They left the shop with Kate's wrists bandaged with clean cloth Hiram had provided. Brock led her to the general store, where he purchased new clothes for her: a practical riding skirt, 2 blouses, undergarments, and a sturdy pair of boots. "You don't have to do all this," Kate protested as he added a warm coat to the pile. "You can't travel in that torn dress," Brock pointed out reasonably. "And we've got a ways to go." "Where exactly are we going?" she asked. "I've got a ranch near Durango," he explained. "About 4 days' ride from here. It's remote, safe. You can stay there while you decide what you want to do next." Kate's expression clouded. "I don't have anywhere to go. My mother died 2 years ago. My stepfather." She trailed off, her hands clenching into fists. "He's the one who gave me to Blackley. I can never go back there." Brock's expression hardened. "You won't have to. You have my word." They took a room at the local hotel, Brock insisting on paying for a separate room for himself while Kate had privacy to bathe and change. When she emerged hours later, looking more like herself in the new clothes, her hair washed and braided, Brock felt a strange tightness in his chest. Even with the bruises on her face and the haunted look in her eyes, Katherine Zimmer was beautiful. But more than that, there was a resilience about her that impressed him. Most women would have been completely broken by what she'd endured. Yet here she was, standing tall, her chin lifted with quiet dignity. "Feel better?" he asked as she joined him for dinner in the hotel's small dining room. "Like a new person," she admitted, self-consciously touching her bandaged wrists. "I can't thank you enough, Mr. Daniels." "Brock," he corrected with a small smile. "And you don't need to thank me." They ate quietly, both aware of the curious glances from other diners. A battered woman with a cowboy wasn't an uncommon sight in frontier towns. But Kate's refined manner of speaking and Brock's obvious respectful treatment of her raised eyebrows. "We should leave at first light," Brock said as they finished their meal. "Blackley might have figured out we headed north." Kate nodded, her earlier confidence wavering. "Will he really come after me?" Brock considered lying to reassure her but decided against it. Men like Blackley don't like losing what they consider their property. And they don't like being humiliated. So yes, I believe he will. Kate absorbed this with remarkable calm. "Then I need to learn to shoot," she stated matter-of-factly. Brock raised an eyebrow, surprised by the request. "You've never handled a firearm?" "My mother thought it unladylike," Kate explained with a hint of bitterness. "But I'm beginning to think being alive is more important than being ladylike." Brock couldn't help but smile at her determination. "I reckon that's true. And yes, I'll teach you." The next morning, they departed Brighton before the sun had fully risen, the cattle drive moving at a steady pace southward. Kate rode her own horse, now a gentle mare Brock had purchased for her at the livery stable. She was clearly inexperienced but determined, gritting her teeth against the discomfort of hours in the saddle. That evening, after they'd made camp, Brock took out his spare revolver, a .38 caliber with a shorter barrel that would be easier for Kate to handle. "First rule," he explained, showing her how to check if the gun was loaded. "Never point this at anything you don't intend to shoot." Kate listened intently as he explained the basics of loading, aiming, and firing. When it came time to practice, Brock set up empty cans on a fallen log about 20 feet away. "Take your time," he advised, standing slightly behind her. "Breathe out as you squeeze the trigger." Kate's first shot missed by several feet, the recoil surprising her. But by her 6th attempt, she managed to graze one of the cans, eliciting a cheer from the cowboys who'd gathered to watch. "Not bad," Brock acknowledged, genuinely impressed by her persistence. "With practice, you'll improve." Kate smiled, a real smile that transformed her face and made Brock's heart skip a beat. "Thank you," she said, handing the gun back to him. "For everything." That night, as Kate slept in a tent the cowboys had set up for her, Brock sat by the fire, deep in thought. Jesse joined him, offering a cup of coffee. "She's something, ain't she?" the foreman commented, nodding toward Kate's tent. Brock grunted non-committally. "You know Blackley won't let this go," Jesse continued, his voice low. "Man's got a reputation for holding grudges." "I know," Brock replied grimly, "which is why we're taking a different route back than planned. Through the mountains instead of following the main trail." Jesse whistled softly. "That'll add days to our journey. Better than riding into an ambush," Brock pointed out. The next morning brought rain, a steady, cold downpour that made travel miserable. Kate said nothing about the discomfort, but Brock noticed her shivering despite the coat he'd bought her. By midday, he called a halt, deciding to make camp early under a rocky overhang that offered some shelter. "No sense pushing on in this," he explained as the men set up a makeshift camp. "The cattle are getting skittish, and we're all soaked through." Kate helped as much as she could, gathering firewood from under the overhang where it had stayed relatively dry. As she worked alongside the cowboys, Brock was struck by how seamlessly she'd integrated into their rough group. There was no pretense about her, no airs despite her obvious education and refinement. That evening, huddled near the fire, the rain still pounding outside their shelter, Kate finally shared her full story with Brock. "My father died when I was 12, she began, staring into the flames. "He left my mother well provided for with a small ranch outside Denver. But she was lonely, and 2 years later she married Edward Zimmer, a businessman from the East who charmed her completely." She paused, her expression darkening. "He wasn't what he seemed. Within a year, he'd gambled away most of my mother's money and mortgaged the ranch to cover his debts. She finally saw him for what he was, but by then it was too late." "When did Vernon Blackley enter the picture?" Brock asked quietly. "About 6 months ago. My mother had passed by then, and I was living with my stepfather in Denver. Blackley came to collect on a debt apparently Edward had borrowed heavily from him. When he couldn't pay, Blackley looked at me and—" She shuddered. "He suggested an alternative arrangement." Edward agreed without hesitation. Brock's hand tightened around his coffee cup. "They sold you to pay a debt," he stated, barely containing his anger. Kate nodded, a single tear sliding down her cheek. "I fought when they came to take me. That's how I got this." She touched a fading bruise on her jaw. "Blackley knocked me unconscious. When I woke up, I was chained in that barn." "How did you end up in Silverton?" "Blackley's main ranch is near Denver. He has properties throughout Colorado," Kate explained. "The Silverton place is more isolated. Perfect for keeping someone who doesn't want to be kept." They fell silent for a while, the only sounds the crackling of the fire and the steady rain outside. "What will you do now?" Brock finally asked. Kate looked up at him, uncertainty in her eyes. "I don't know. I have an aunt in San Francisco, but we haven't spoken in years. I have no money, no possessions." She straightened her shoulders. "But I'll figure something out. I always do." Brock found himself admiring her resilience once again. "The offer stands," he said. "You can stay at my ranch as long as you need. It's peaceful there. Good place to think about your next steps." "Why are you being so kind?" Kate asked, the question that had clearly been troubling her since their escape. "You don't know me. I could be lying about everything." Brock considered her question seriously. "I've met a lot of people in my time, Miss Zimmer. Gotten pretty good at reading them. You're not lying." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "As for why I'm helping, when I was 19, I watched a man beat his wife to death in a saloon in Abilene. No one stepped in. Not me, not the bartender, not the sheriff who was playing cards in the corner. We all just watched it happen." He stared into the fire, the memory still vivid after all these years. "I've never forgiven myself for that. Promised I'd never stand by again when someone needed help. Kate reached out impulsively, placing her hand on his arm. You're a good man, Brock Daniels. Their eyes met, and something passed between them, an understanding, a connection that went beyond their brief acquaintance. For a fleeting moment, Brock wanted to take her hand in his, but he restrained himself. Kate had been through enough without having to fend off the attentions of yet another man, no matter how well-intentioned. The moment passed, and Kate withdrew her hand, but something had shifted between them. The walls each had built for protection had begun to crumble, just a little. The rain continued through the night and into the next day, forcing them to remain camped under the overhang. The unexpected delay made Brock anxious, but there was nothing to be done about it. Driving cattle in such conditions would be foolhardy. To pass the time, Kate asked him about his life, and Brock found himself sharing stories he rarely told anyone. He told her about growing up on a small farm in Missouri, about losing his parents to cholera when he was 16, about drifting west and eventually saving enough from cowboying to buy his own small spread. It's nothing fancy, he said of his ranch. 300 acres, a decent house, a barn that doesn't leak too badly. But it's mine. It sounds wonderful, Kate said sincerely. A place that's truly yours. That's something special. The rain finally ceased on the third day, allowing them to continue their journey. The going was slow, the trails muddy and treacherous in places, especially as they began to climb into higher elevations to avoid the main routes where Blackley might look for them. On the 7th day of their journey, Brock's caution proved warranted. They were traversing a narrow mountain pass when Jesse, who was riding point, returned at a gallop. "Riders coming," he reported tersely. 6 of them, well armed. Brock's expression hardened. "Blackley's men," Jesse nodded. "Recognized one of them. Works as a gun hand at Blackley's Denver ranch." Brock quickly assessed their situation. The pass was too narrow to turn the cattle around, and there was nowhere to hide in the rocky terrain. "How far?" he asked. "About 10 minutes behind me," Jesse replied. Brock turned to Kate, whose face had gone pale. "Get off the trail," he instructed. "Hide among those boulders. Take this." He handed her the revolver she'd been practicing with. Kate shook her head firmly. "I won't leave you to face them alone." "This isn't up for debate," Brock said sharply. "They're after you, not us. If they don't see you, they might just move on. And if they don't," she challenged. "Then we'll deal with them," Brock stated, his hand resting on his gun belt. "But I'll feel a lot better knowing you're not in the line of fire." After a moment's hesitation, Kate nodded, taking the revolver and disappearing among the large boulders off the trail. Brock positioned his men across the path, using the cattle as a partial shield. The riders appeared around a bend in the trail, exactly as Jesse had described 6 hard-looking men, all armed, with Vernon Blackley himself in the lead. Brock had never met the man personally, but his reputation preceded him. In his 50s, with a silver-streaked beard and cold eyes, Blackley carried himself with the arrogance of someone used to getting his way. The group halted about 30 yards from Brock and his men, assessing the situation. "Afternoon," Blackley called out, his voice deceptively friendly. "You boys mind moving those cattle? We're in a hurry." "Trail's narrow," Brock responded evenly. "Take some time to move them. Where you headed in such a rush?" Blackley's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Looking for a thief. Stole something valuable from me. Heard he might be heading this way." "Haven't seen any thieves," Brock replied. "Just cattle and cowboys on this trail." Blackley's gaze swept over the group, clearly searching for Kate. "Mind if we take a look at your outfit? Make sure our thief isn't hiding among you?" "Actually, I do mind," Brock said, his hand moving closer to his revolver. "We're running behind schedule as it is." The friendly pretense dropped from Blackley's face. I know you have her, Daniels. The blacksmith in Brighton was quite helpful once my men explained the situation to him. Brock's expression remained neutral, despite the revelation that Hiram had betrayed them. Don't know what you're talking about. Katherine Zimmer, Blackley spat. The woman you stole from my property. She belongs to me, legally purchased to settle a debt. People can't be bought and sold, Brock responded, his anger finally showing. Not in this country. Not anymore. Blackley laughed coldly. The law sees things differently out here. Now hand her over, and we can all part ways peacefully. That's not going to happen, Brock stated firmly, his cowboys spreading out slightly, hands hovering near their weapons. Tension crackled in the mountain air as the two groups faced off. Blackley's men were professional gun hands, but Brock's cowboys were no strangers to violence either, having defended their herds from rustlers and other threats over the years. Last chance, Blackley warned. Give me the girl or things get ugly. She's not a girl and she's not yours, Brock replied, his voice steady. Turn around and ride away. That's your last chance. For a moment, it seemed as though bloodshed was inevitable. Then a shot rang out, not from either group of men, but from the boulders where Kate was hiding. The bullet struck the ground directly in front of Blackley's horse, causing the animal to rear in panic. The next one won't miss, Kate called out, emerging from her hiding place with Brock's revolver trained steadily on Blackley. And I'll aim a bit higher. Brock wanted to curse her for exposing herself but had to admire her courage. She stood tall among the rocks, her aim remarkably steady for someone who'd only been shooting for a week. Katherine, Blackley said, regaining control of his horse. Don't be foolish. You know your stepfather signed legal papers. You're my property until his debt is paid. I'm no one's property, Kate replied, her voice unwavering. And any papers signed without my consent aren't worth the ink used to sign them. Blackley's expression darkened. You always were too clever for your own good. It would have gone easier for you if you just accepted your situation. Like those other girls did? Kate asked pointedly. The ones you kept before me? The ones who disappeared when you tired of them? Brock glanced at Kate sharply, this new information chilling him. Blackley's face contorted with rage at having his secrets exposed. Shoot them all, he ordered his men, reaching for his own weapon. Gunfire erupted from both sides. Brock dove for cover behind a boulder, firing as he moved. From the corner of his eye, he saw Kate duck down, still clutching the revolver. Two of Blackley's men fell immediately, one shot by Jesse, the other by one of the younger cowboys. One of Brock's men cried out, clutching his shoulder as he fell from his horse. The cattle, panicked by the gunfire, began to stampede, further confusing the chaotic scene. Brock used the distraction to work his way closer to Blackley, who had dismounted and taken cover behind a rock outcropping. A bullet grazed Brock's arm, tearing his sleeve and leaving a burning line across his bicep. He ignored the pain, focused entirely on reaching Blackley. When he spotted the man attempting to circle around toward Kate's position, cold determination filled him. With careful aim, Brock fired, his bullet striking Blackley in the leg. The older man fell with a howl of pain but managed to return fire, his bullet narrowly missing Brock's head. The gunfight lasted less than 2 minutes, but it felt like an eternity. When the smoke cleared, 3 of Blackley's men were dead, 1 wounded, and the remaining 2 had fled. On Brock's side, 1 cowboy had taken a bullet to the shoulder, and another had a minor wound to his thigh. Blackley himself lay against a rock, his leg bleeding heavily, his gun just out of reach. Brock approached cautiously, kicking the weapon further away before standing over the wounded man. It's over, he stated flatly. Blackley glared up at him with hatred. You're dead, Daniels. If not today, then tomorrow or the next day. I have friends in high places. Not as many as you think, came Kate's voice as she approached, the revolver still in her hand. Not after they learn what you've been doing to young women for years. Fear flickered in Blackley's eyes. No one will believe a woman like you over a man of my standing. They will when they hear it from multiple sources, Kate countered, including your former housekeeper, who helped me escape the first time. She's been keeping records, names, dates. She gave them to me before you recaptured me. They're hidden where you'll never find them. Whether this was true or a bluff, Brock couldn't tell, but the effect on Blackley was immediate. The color drained from his face. You're lying, he hissed. Am I? Kate's steady gaze never wavered. Take that chance if you want. Continue to threaten us, and those documents will find their way to every newspaper in Colorado and the territorial governor's office. Brock was impressed by her quick thinking. Even if there were no documents, the suggestion was enough to make Blackley reconsider his position. What do you want? Blackley finally asked, his voice tight with pain and fury. For you to disappear from my life, Kate stated simply. Return to Denver. Forget I exist, and never come after me or Brock again. Blackley's eyes darted between them, calculation evident in his gaze. And the documents? Will remain hidden as insurance, Kate replied. Live out your life in peace, and they'll never see the light of day. Come after either of us again, and every sordid detail of your activities will become public knowledge. For a long moment, Blackley said nothing, clearly weighing his options. Finally, he gave a curt nod. Fine. You have my word. Your word means nothing, Brock interjected coldly. But your self-interest I can believe in. Help your wounded man onto a horse and get out of here. If I ever see your face again, I won't aim for the leg. With Jesse and another cowboy keeping their guns trained on him, Blackley was helped to his feet and onto his horse. His remaining conscious gun hand supported him as they slowly rode back the way they had come. Only when they were out of sight did Brock turn to Kate. That was either the bravest or the most foolish thing I've ever seen, he said, a mixture of admiration and exasperation in his voice. Kate holstered the revolver in her belt, her hands finally beginning to tremble now that the danger had passed. I couldn't let you face them alone, not after everything you've done for me. Is it true? Brock asked quietly. About the documents? A small, mysterious smile curved Kate's lips. Let's just say Blackley's housekeeper was indeed sympathetic to my situation. Whether she kept records or not is something only she and I know. Brock shook his head, impressed by her quick thinking. Remind me never to play poker with you, Miss Zimmer. They attended to the wounded cowboys, neither injury serious enough to prevent travel. The scattered cattle took hours to round up, but by nightfall, they were back on the trail, moving at a careful pace through the mountain pass. That night, as they camped beside a small alpine lake, Brock found himself unable to sleep. The events of the day kept replaying in his mind: the gunfight, Kate's bravery, the look in Blackley's eyes when he realized he'd been outmaneuvered. Mostly, though, he thought about Kate herself and the strange, powerful feelings she stirred in him. He was still sitting by the dying embers of the fire when she approached, wrapped in a blanket against the mountain chill. You should be resting, he commented as she sat beside him. So should you, she countered. How's your arm? Brock glanced at the bandage Jesse had wrapped around his bullet graze. It's nothing. I've had worse from barbed wire. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the moonlight reflect off the still surface of the lake. Do you think he'll keep his word? Kate finally asked. Brock considered the question seriously. Men like Blackley only respect power and consequences. You gave him a compelling reason to leave you alone. So yes, I think he'll keep his distance at least for now. Kate nodded thoughtfully. I've never blackmailed anyone before, she admitted with a small laugh. It felt rather liberating. Brock smiled at the unexpected humor. You're full of surprises, Miss Zimmer. Kate, she corrected gently. After everything we've been through, I think you've earned the right to use my first name. Kate, he repeated, liking the way it felt on his tongue. She turned to face him, her expression serious. I meant what I said earlier. You're a good man, Brock Daniels. The kind this world needs more of. Before he could respond, she leaned forward and pressed a soft, brief kiss to his cheek, then stood and returned to her tent, leaving Brock sitting by the fire with his hand raised to the spot her lips had touched, a peculiar warmth spreading through him that had nothing to do with the embers glowing before him. The remaining days of their journey passed without incident. The higher mountain trails were challenging but beautiful, with sweeping vistas of the Colorado wilderness surrounding them. Kate continued to improve her riding skills and her shooting, determined to become self-sufficient. Brock found himself watching her with growing admiration not just for her beauty, which was considerable, but for her intelligence, resilience, and the quiet strength that seemed to radiate from her. For her part, Kate observed Brock with increasing interest. He was unlike any man she'd known, straightforward yet thoughtful, strong without being domineering, kind without seeking recognition for his kindness. She noticed the respectful way he treated his men, the gentle way he handled animals, the careful consideration he gave before making decisions. These qualities, combined with his undeniable physical appeal, made her heart beat faster whenever he was near. As they descended from the mountains into the more hospitable terrain approaching Durango, Kate found herself both anticipating and dreading their arrival at Brock's ranch. What would happen then? Would he expect her to move on quickly? The uncertainty of her future weighed on her, though she was careful not to show it. On the 12th day of their journey, as the sun was beginning to set, Brock pointed to a valley spread out below them. There it is, he said with quiet pride. Crescent Moon Ranch. Kate followed his gaze. From their elevated position, she could see a neat cluster of buildings: a two-story house, a large barn, several smaller outbuildings, all surrounded by fenced pastures and grazing land that stretched to the base of the mountains to the west. It's beautiful, she said sincerely, understanding now why he spoke of it with such pride. It wasn't the largest ranch she'd seen, but it was well maintained and situated in a breathtaking location, with a creek running through the property and forests providing natural boundaries on two sides. As they approached the ranch, a woman emerged from the main house, tall and gray-haired, with a weathered face that broke into a wide smile at the sight of the returning party. Martha Bennett, Brock explained to Kate, my housekeeper and general voice of reason. Been with me since I bought the place 5 years ago. Martha greeted the returning cowboys enthusiastically before turning her attention to Brock and the unfamiliar woman riding beside him. About time you got back, she called out. And who's this you've brought with you? Brock made the introductions as they dismounted. Martha, this is Katherine Zimmer. She'll be staying with us for a while. Kate, this is Martha, who keeps this place from falling apart when I'm gone. Martha's shrewd eyes took in Kate's appearance, noting the healing bruises and the wary look that hadn't quite left her eyes. Whatever conclusions she drew, she kept to herself, simply extending a warm welcome. Any friend of Brock's is welcome here, she said, taking Kate's hands in her own work-roughened ones. You look like you could use a hot meal and a real bed. Come inside, dear. The house was larger than it appeared from outside, with a spacious kitchen that served as its heart. Martha bustled about, heating up a stew she'd prepared earlier while Kate sat at the large wooden table, feeling oddly at home despite the unfamiliar surroundings. When Martha set a bowl of stew in front of her, the rich aroma made Kate realize how hungry she was. She ate with enthusiasm, savoring real food after nearly 2 weeks of trail rations. There's a bath ready upstairs, Martha informed her when she'd finished eating. I've put out some clean towels and a nightgown that should fit you. It was my daughter's. She's married and living in California now. You're very kind, Kate said, touched by the woman's thoughtfulness. Just doing what anyone would, Martha replied with a dismissive wave, though her eyes were gentle. Besides, it's nice to have another woman around. Too much male company can be wearing on the nerves. Kate laughed, the sound surprising her. It had been so long since she'd laughed freely. Upstairs, she found a bedroom prepared for her, simple but comfortable, with a large window overlooking the valley and mountains beyond. The promised bath stood in an adjoining room, steam rising invitingly from the water. Kate sank into the hot water with a sigh of pure pleasure, allowing herself to truly relax for the first time since her ordeal began. As she soaked, she thought about her situation. She had no money, no possessions beyond the clothes Brock had purchased for her, and no clear plan for the future. Yet somehow, she felt more free and hopeful than she had in years. After her bath, dressed in the borrowed nightgown, Kate stood at the bedroom window, gazing out at the stars appearing above the mountains. A soft knock at the door roused her from her thoughts. "Come in," she called, expecting Martha. Instead, Brock entered, looking freshly bathed himself, his damp hair curling slightly at his collar. He stopped just inside the doorway, maintaining a respectful distance. "Just wanted to make sure you have everything you need," he said, his eyes taking in the room rather than her nightgown-clad form. "Everything's perfect," Kate assured him. "Your home is lovely. It's not much compared to what you must be used to," Brock said, a trace of self-consciousness in his voice. Kate shook her head firmly. "My stepfather's house was grand but cold. This place feels like a real home." Brock smiled, clearly pleased by her assessment. "Well, you're welcome to stay as long as you like. No rush to figure out your next steps." "Thank you," Kate said, meaning it deeply, "for everything." Brock nodded, looking as if he wanted to say more, but instead bid her good night and left, closing the door softly behind him. Kate returned to the window, her thoughts tumultuous. She was developing feelings for this man who had rescued her. Feelings that went far beyond gratitude. But was it real, or simply a natural response to his kindness after such trauma? And even if it was real, would a man like Brock Daniels want a woman with her complications, her baggage? These questions followed her into sleep, where for the first time in weeks, no nightmares disturbed her rest. The days at Crescent Moon Ranch fell into a comfortable pattern. Kate, determined not to be a burden, insisted on helping with household chores. Martha was initially reluctant but soon came to appreciate the younger woman's assistance and company. In the afternoons, Kate often accompanied Brock as he went about his ranch duties, learning about cattle breeding, horse training, and the countless other skills required to run a successful ranch. She proved to be a quick study, eager to learn and unafraid of hard work. Brock continued her shooting lessons, adding riding skills and even basic ranch work to her education. He found himself increasingly impressed by her adaptability and determination. The frightened, battered woman he'd found chained in that barn was transforming before his eyes into a confident, capable person. One evening, about 2 weeks after their arrival at the ranch, Brock found Kate sitting on the front porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and purple. "May I join you?" he asked, gesturing to the empty chair beside her. "Of course," she replied with a smile that made his heart beat faster. They sat in companionable silence for a while, the only sounds the distant lowing of cattle and the gentle creaking of the porch swing. "I've been thinking," Kate finally said, her eyes still on the mountains. "I need to find a way to support myself. I can't impose on your hospitality indefinitely." "You're not imposing," Brock assured her quickly. "I like having you here." Kate turned to look at him, her expression serious. That's very kind, but we both know I need to establish some independence. I've been thinking about teaching. I was educated at a good school in Boston before my father died, and I've always loved literature and history. Brock nodded thoughtfully. Durango's growing fast. They're building a new schoolhouse, and I heard they're looking for teachers. Really? Kate's face lit up with excitement. Do you think they'd consider me? Why wouldn't they? You're educated, articulate. I'd be happy to introduce you to some folks in town who serve on the school board. Kate's smile widened. I'd appreciate that very much. As promised, Brock took Kate into Durango the following day to meet with Harold Jenkins, a prominent merchant who served on the school board. After an informal interview that felt more like a friendly conversation, Jenkins seemed impressed with Kate's knowledge and enthusiasm. We're desperate for qualified teachers, Miss Zimmer, he admitted. Most of the young women who come out here either return east when they realize how rough frontier life can be, or they get married within months of arriving. I assure you, Mr. Jenkins, I find frontier life invigorating rather than intimidating, Kate replied with a smile. And I have no immediate matrimonial prospects to distract me from teaching duties. Jenkins chuckled at her forthright manner. The school term begins in 6 weeks. If you're still interested, I believe the board would be pleased to offer you a position. Kate accepted eagerly, her mind already filling with plans and ideas for her classroom. As they rode back to the ranch, she chatted animatedly about teaching methods and books she hoped to incorporate. Brock listened, enjoying her excitement but feeling a strange melancholy at the prospect of her eventual departure from the ranch. He'd grown accustomed to her presence, her voice calling good morning as he came in for breakfast, the sound of her laughter as she and Martha exchanged stories, the way she'd begun to hum softly while going about her tasks. The weeks passed quickly. Kate continued to heal both physically and emotionally. The bruises faded, and the haunted look gradually left her eyes. She still had nightmares occasionally. Brock would sometimes hear her cry out in the night, but they became less frequent as time went on. One morning, Kate joined Brock as he worked with a young colt, a spirited bay that was proving challenging to train. She watched from the corral fence as Brock moved patiently with the animal, speaking in low, soothing tones. You have a way with horses, she observed as the colt finally allowed Brock to touch its neck without flinching. Brock shrugged modestly. They just need patience and consistency. Same as people, I reckon. Kate smiled at the comparison. Is that how you've been handling me? With patience and consistency. Brock looked up, surprised by the question. I wouldn't say I've been handling you at all. You're not a horse that needs breaking. No, Kate agreed softly. But I was broken, wasn't I? When you found me. Brock left the colt and walked over to where she stood at the fence. You were hurt, he corrected gently. Not broken. There's a difference. Kate's eyes met his, something vulnerable in their green depths. Sometimes I'm not sure. Sometimes I still feel his hands on me, still hear his voice. Without thinking, Brock reached out, covering her hand where it rested on the fence rail. That'll fade with time. The memories won't disappear completely, but they'll lose their power over you. How do you know? She asked, not pulling her hand away. Because I've seen it before. In myself, in others. He hesitated, then continued. After that woman was killed in Abilene, the one I told you about, I had nightmares for months. Kept seeing her face, hearing her pleas for help. But eventually, those dreams came less often. The guilt remains, but it doesn't paralyze me anymore. Kate turned her hand beneath his so their palms met, fingers intertwining naturally. Thank you for understanding. For not dismissing what happened to me as something I should just get over. They stood like that for a long moment, connected by more than just their clasped hands. Brock felt a powerful urge to pull her closer, to offer physical as well as emotional comfort, but he resisted. Kate had endured enough unwanted male attention. If anything was to develop between them, it would have to be at her pace, on her terms. As if reading his thoughts, Kate gently withdrew her hand. "I should help Martha with lunch," she said, her voice slightly unsteady. "She's teaching me to make biscuits today." Brock nodded, letting her go. "Good luck." Martha guards her biscuit recipe like it's gold bullion. Kate laughed, the tension broken. "I've been working on her for weeks. I think she's finally decided I'm worthy." As she walked back toward the house, Brock returned his attention to the colt, but his thoughts remained with Kate. She was becoming essential to him in a way no woman ever had before. The prospect of her moving into town to take up her teaching position in a few short weeks left a hollow feeling in his chest. That evening, after dinner, Martha announced she was visiting her sister in a neighboring town for a few days. "Josephine's youngest just had a baby," she explained as she packed a small bag. "First great niece. Can't miss that." "Of course not," Brock agreed. "Jessie can drive you to the station in the morning." After Martha retired to bed, Brock and Kate sat in the parlor, a comfortable room with well-worn furniture and bookshelves lining one wall. Kate was reading, while Brock ostensibly reviewed cattle records but found himself repeatedly glancing at her over his ledger. She looked so at home there, curled in his father's old armchair, her face animated as she turned the pages of her book. The lamplight caught the auburn highlights in her hair, which had grown longer during her time at the ranch and now hung in loose waves past her shoulders. "You're staring," Kate commented without looking up from her book. Brock felt heat rise in his face at being caught. "Sorry. Just thinking." "About what?" She closed her book, giving him her full attention. Brock hesitated, then decided on honesty. "About how you fit here, like you've always been part of this place." Kate's expression softened. "It does feel that way sometimes. Like I found a place I belong after years of drifting." "Then why leave?" The question slipped out before Brock could stop it. "Leave," Kate repeated, confused. "To teach in town," Brock clarified. "You could stay here. The ranch is doing well. I could pay you a proper salary to help with the books. The correspondence. Martha's eyesight isn't what it used to be, and I've never had a head for paperwork." Kate studied him thoughtfully. "Are you offering me a job, Mr. Daniels?" "I'm offering you a place," Brock replied, more earnestly than he'd intended. "If you want it." The air between them seemed to thicken with unspoken possibilities. Kate set her book aside and stood, moving to the window where moonlight streamed in, silvering her profile. "What exactly are you saying, Brock?" she asked quietly, still facing the window. Brock set down his ledger and crossed the room to stand behind her. "I'm saying I've grown fond of having you here. More than fond." He took a deep breath. "I'm saying I care for you, Kate. As more than just someone I helped, more than a friend." Kate turned to face him, her expression unreadable in the dim light. "And if I don't feel the same way, would your offer of employment still stand?" The question stung, but Brock answered without hesitation. "Of course. I'd never make your home or livelihood conditional on personal feelings." Kate searched his face for a long moment. "And if I do feel the same way, what then?" Hope surged in Brock's chest. "Then we could see where those feelings lead us. No pressure, no expectations. Just possibility." Kate's eyes never left his. "I've been afraid to trust these feelings," she admitted softly. "Afraid they're just gratitude, or a response to your kindness after what I endured." "And now?" Brock asked, his voice equally soft. "Now I think they're real," she whispered. "Too real to ignore any longer." Slowly, giving her every opportunity to step away, Brock raised his hand to her cheek. When she didn't flinch or withdraw, He gently traced the line of her jaw with his fingertips. "May I kiss you, Kate?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. In answer, Kate closed the small distance between them, rising on her toes to press her lips to his in a kiss that began tentatively but quickly deepened as years of loneliness and weeks of growing attraction ignited between them. When they finally parted, both breathless, Kate rested her forehead against his chest. "I never thought I could feel this way again," she murmured. "After what happened, I thought that part of me was dead." Brock wrapped his arms around her, holding her close. "Nothing about you is dead, Kate Zimmer. You're the most vibrantly alive person I've ever known." They stood in the moonlight, simply holding each other, until Kate finally stepped back with a shy smile. "It's late," she said, "and there's still much to figure out." Brock nodded, understanding her need for space to process this new development. "We have time," he assured her. "All the time you need." As Kate ascended the stairs to her bedroom, Brock remained in the parlor, his mind racing with possibilities. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to imagine a future that included a partner, a family, a complete life. The next morning, Brock awoke to the aroma of coffee and biscuits. He found Kate in the kitchen, her hair tied back with a ribbon, flour dusting her apron as she removed a tray from the oven. "You're up early," he commented, pouring himself a cup of the strong coffee she'd brewed. "Couldn't sleep?" she admitted with a smile that suggested her insomnia hadn't been unpleasant. "Thought I'd practice those biscuits Martha's been teaching me to make." Brock approached cautiously, uncertain of where they stood in the light of day. Kate's smile widened as she read his hesitation. Setting down the biscuit tray, she closed the distance between them, rising on her toes to place a quick kiss on his lips. "Good morning," she said simply. Relief and happiness flooded through him. "Morning," he replied, unable to keep the grin from his face. They ate breakfast together, discussing the day's tasks with a new undercurrent of awareness between them. After Jessie had departed with Martha to catch the morning train, Brock and Kate found themselves alone on the ranch for the first time. "I should ride out to check the north pasture fence," Brock said as they cleared the breakfast dishes. "Some of the cattle got through a gap there yesterday." "May I come with you?" Kate asked. "I've been practicing my riding, and it's such a beautiful day." They rode out together, Kate handling her mare with increasing confidence. The north pasture lay about 3 miles from the main house, a verdant stretch of land bordered by the creek on one side and a stand of aspen trees on the other. As they rode, Kate shared more about her life before Blackley, her childhood in Denver, her schooling in Boston, her dreams of traveling to Europe that had been cut short by her father's death. Brock, in turn, told her more about his years drifting through the West, working cattle drives and taking odd jobs before saving enough to buy his ranch. "It wasn't always easy," he admitted as they dismounted to repair the broken fence. "First couple of years, I thought I'd made a terrible mistake. Drought killed half my herd, and I nearly lost the place to the bank." "What kept you going?" Kate asked, holding the fence posts steady as Brock hammered them back into place. "Stubbornness, mostly," he replied with a wry smile, "and not knowing what else I'd do if I failed. This land gets in your blood." Kate looked around at the sweeping landscape, the mountains rising majestically in the distance, the creek glittering in the sunlight, wildflowers dotting the meadow with splashes of color. "I can see why," she said softly. "It's beautiful here." "It's more beautiful with you in it," Brock said, setting down his hammer and turning to face her. Kate blushed at the earnest compliment. "You say the most unexpected things sometimes." "Just the truth," he replied with a shrug. "Been thinking it for weeks but didn't have the courage to say it out loud." Kate stepped closer, her expression turning serious. "Are you sure about this, Brock? About me? My past is complicated." Blackley may have backed off for now, but there's no guarantee he won't cause trouble in the future. And there's my stepfather who's still out there somewhere. Not to mention the gossip that will surely follow when people learn where I came from. Brock took her hands in his grip firm and reassuring. I'm sure about you, Kate. Your past doesn't scare me. As for Blackley and your stepfather, let them come. We'll face them together. And the gossip? She pressed. People will always talk, Brock acknowledged. But the ones worth knowing will judge you by who you are, not where you came from or what was done to you. Kate's eyes filled with tears, but she smiled through them. I think I'm falling in love with you, Brock Daniels. The words sent a jolt of pure joy through him. Good, he replied, pulling her gently into his arms. Because I'm already there. Their kiss beneath the Colorado sky was a promise of healing, of hope, of a future neither had dared imagine until now. The 3 days of Martha's absence passed in a golden haze for Kate and Brock. They worked side by side during the day, sharing meals and conversation, gradually learning the rhythms of each other's lives. In the evenings, they sat on the porch watching the sunset, or read aloud to each other from Brock's small collection of books. Their physical relationship progressed slowly, with Brock carefully attuned to Kate's comfort level. Though passion simmered between them, he never pushed beyond what she freely offered, understanding that trust was still fragile after her ordeal. When Martha returned, she took one look at the pair of them at breakfast and gave a satisfied nod. About time, was all she said, but her approving smile spoke volumes. In the weeks that followed, Kate made a difficult decision. Though the teaching position had excited her, she realized her place was at the ranch not just because of her feelings for Brock, but because the land and life there had become home in a way no place had been since her father's death. Harold Jenkins was disappointed but understanding when she declined the teaching position, recommending instead a friend from her school days who was looking to relocate west. The offer remains open should you change your mind, he assured her, giving Brock a knowing look that made Kate blush. Summer faded into autumn, the aspen trees turning brilliant gold against the evergreen backdrop of the mountains. Kate fully settled into ranch life, proving to be not only a capable assistant with the books and correspondence but also developing a surprising talent for animal husbandry. She had a particular way with the horses, especially the more difficult ones that resisted training. One crisp October morning, Brock found her in the barn, gently coaxing a nervous mare to accept a saddle. The animal had been abused by its previous owner and flinched at sudden movements or loud noises. That's it, girl, Kate was saying softly, her hand stroking the mare's neck as she slowly raised the saddle blanket. Nothing to be afraid of. No one's going to hurt you here. Brock watched from the doorway, struck by the parallel between Kate's gentle handling of the traumatized horse and his own careful approach to Kate in those early days. She'd come so far since then they both had. That evening, after dinner, Brock asked Kate to join him for a ride. Though the autumn air had a distinct chill, the sky was clear, stars beginning to appear as they rode to a hilltop overlooking the ranch. Everything looks so small from up here, Kate observed as they dismounted. Like a toy ranch. Brock spread a blanket on the ground, and they sat side by side, looking down at the lights of the main house twinkling in the gathering darkness. I came up here often during those first hard years, Brock admitted. Helped me keep perspective. Reminded me what I was working for. And what was that? Kate asked, leaning against his shoulder. This, he said simply, his arm encircling her. A home. Place of my own. I just didn't realize what was missing until you arrived. Kate turned to face him, moonlight silvering her features. And what was missing? Someone to share it with, Brock replied, reaching into his pocket. Someone who sees the beauty in this land the way I do. Someone brave and kind and stronger than she knows. He withdrew a small wooden box, hand-carved with a pattern of interlocking leaves. I'm not a wealthy man, Kate. The ranch does well enough, but there will always be lean years along with the good ones. I can't offer you luxury or an easy life. Kate's eyes widened as she realized what was happening. Brock, but I can offer you my heart, he continued, opening the box to reveal a simple gold ring set with a small sapphire. My name, my life, if you'll have them. Tears spilled down Kate's cheeks as she looked from the ring to Brock's face. Are you asking me to marry you? I am, he confirmed, his voice steady despite the nervous pounding of his heart. I love you, Katherine Zimmer. Will you become my wife? Kate's answer was to throw her arms around his neck, nearly knocking him backwards. Yes, she whispered against his lips. Yes, I'll marry you. Their kiss was a ceiling of promises, deep and sweet under the vast Colorado sky. When they finally parted, Brock slipped the ring onto Kate's finger. It was my mother's, he explained. The only thing of hers I still have. Kate looked down at the ring, then back to Brock's face. It's perfect, she said softly. Absolutely perfect. They were married on a bright November day, with the aspens nearly bare and the first dusting of snow on the distant peaks. The ceremony was small, just Martha, Jesse and the other ranch hands, Harold Jenkins and his wife, and a few friends Brock had made during his years in the area. Kate wore a dress of deep blue that Martha had helped her sew, with a lace collar that had belonged to Martha's own wedding gown. Brock, uncomfortable in his Sunday suit, couldn't take his eyes off her as she walked toward him in the small Durango church. The reception was held at the ranch, with tables set up in the yard and Martha's cooking drawing praise from all the guests. As the afternoon wore on, many of the guests departed, leaving just the ranch family to continue the celebration more informally. Jesse brought out his fiddle, playing lively tunes that had everyone clapping and stomping. To everyone's surprise, Martha revealed a fine singing voice, performing old ballads that brought tears to more than one eye. As the evening cooled, the party moved inside to the parlor, where Brock and Kate shared their first dance as husband and wife. The ranch hands hooped and cheered, embarrassing Brock but making Kate laugh with delight. Later, after the last guest had departed and the house had grown quiet, Brock carried his bride across the threshold of the bedroom that would now be theirs. The room had been transformed in his absence, fresh curtains at the windows, new linens on the bed, and a small vase of late blooming wildflowers on the dresser. Martha's work? He guessed, setting Kate gently on her feet. Mine, actually, she replied with a shy smile, though Martha helped with the curtains. Do you like it? Brock looked around the room that had been his alone for so long, now softened and warmed by Kate's touch. I love it, he said honestly. Makes it feel like our room now, not just mine. Kate's smile widened as she stepped into his embrace. Our room, she repeated, testing the words. Our home, our life, our everything, Brock agreed, lowering his mouth to hers. The winter of 1876-77 was one of the harshest on record in Colorado. Snow piled high around the ranch house, and bitter winds swept down from the mountains. But inside, warmth and contentment reigned. Kate and Brock settled into married life with surprising ease, their days filled with work and their nights with love and conversation. In February, during a rare break in the winter storms, a letter arrived that shattered their peaceful existence. It was from a Denver lawyer, informing Kate that her stepfather, Edward Zimmer, had died of pneumonia. More significantly, the lawyer explained that Edward had left substantial debts, and creditors were making claims against her mother's ranch which, despite Edward's attempts to sell it, remained partially in Kate's name. I need to go to Denver, Kate said after showing the letter to Brock. Sort this out in person. Brock's immediate instinct was to protect her from the painful memories Denver held, but he recognized the determination in her eyes. We'll go together, he stated firmly, as soon as the weather clears enough for travel. A week later, they boarded the train to Denver, both apprehensive about what awaited them. Kate had not returned to the city since her abduction nearly a year earlier. Though she had healed greatly in the intervening months, Brock knew the trip would test her newfound strength. Denver had grown since Kate's departure, the streets busier, the buildings taller. As they made their way to the lawyer's office, Kate walked with her head high, though Brock could feel the tension in her hand clasped tightly in his. The lawyer, Mr. Thompson, was a surprisingly young man with kind eyes and a straightforward manner. He explained that while Edward Zimmer had indeed accumulated substantial debts, the ranch property itself had been protected by stipulations in Kate's father's will. "Your father was a prudent man, Mrs. Daniels," Thompson explained, using Kate's married name with a respectful nod. "He specified that the ranch could not be sold or mortgaged without your express consent once you reached majority. Your stepfather attempted to circumvent this through various means, including—" he hesitated, "including trying to sell me instead." Kate finished for him, her voice steady. "To Vernon Blackley." Thompson looked uncomfortable but nodded. "I believe that was the case, yes. Blackley claimed to have papers giving him certain rights, but they would have been legally invalid even if signed under duress." "Where is Blackley now?" Brock asked, the name still raising his hackles months later. "Left Colorado about 6 months ago," Thompson replied. "Rumor has it he's in Nevada now. Banking interests, I believe." Kate and Brock exchanged a look of relief. It seemed Kate's bluff about incriminating documents had worked better than they'd hoped. "So the ranch is still mine?" Kate asked, returning to the matter at hand. "Legally, yes," Thompson confirmed, "though it's been neglected since your mother's death. The buildings are in poor condition, and there's no livestock to speak of. The land itself, however, has appreciated considerably in value due to Denver's growth." By the end of the meeting, Kate had a clearer picture of her inheritance and the options available to her. The following day, she and Brock rode out to see the ranch where she'd grown up. The place was a shadow of what Kate remembered. The once proud house was weathered and sagging, the barn roof partially collapsed, the fences fallen in many places. Yet the land itself remained beautiful rolling hills with views of the mountains, a creek running through the property, rich soil that would support crops or grazing. "It's strange," Kate said as they stood on a hilltop overlooking the ranch. "I was so afraid to come back, but now that I'm here, all I feel is peace. The bad memories have lost their power." Brock squeezed her hand. "What do you want to do with the place?" Kate considered the question seriously. "I don't want to sell it. This was my father's dream, and my mother loved it here at least until Edward came along." She turned to face Brock. "But my home is with you now at Crescent Moon. I don't want to leave that behind." "We don't have to," Brock assured her. "We could fix this place up, hire a foreman to run it, visit when we can. It could be a good investment for our future." Kate's eyes lit up at the possibility. "Our future," she repeated thoughtfully. "Our children's future, perhaps." Brock's heart skipped a beat at the mention of children, something they'd discussed in general terms but not with any specificity. "Are you trying to tell me something, Mrs. Daniels?" Kate laughed at his expression. "Not yet," she assured him. "But someday. And when that day comes, wouldn't it be nice to have a legacy to pass on? 2 ranches instead of 1. The more they discussed it, the more sense the plan made. They would keep the Denver ranch, restore it gradually, and hire a trusted foreman to manage day-to-day operations. The additional income would provide security for their future and any children that might come along. By the time they returned to Durango a week later, they had set the plan in motion. Thompson would oversee the initial repairs and the hiring of a foreman, with Kate and Brock returning to Denver in the spring to check on progress. Life at Crescent Moon returned to its pleasant rhythm, with one significant change. Now that their financial future was more secure, Brock and Kate began to speak more concretely about starting a family. For Kate, who had once feared that her traumatic experiences might have forever tainted the prospect of physical intimacy, the desire for a child with Brock was a final healing proof that her heart and body had fully reclaimed their capacity for love and life. Spring arrived early that year, the snow melting rapidly and wildflowers carpeting the meadows by early April. Kate and Brock made their planned trip to Denver, pleased to find the ranch already showing signs of improvement under the supervision of the foreman. They'd hired a capable older man named Samuel Watson, who had managed larger spreads but was looking for a less demanding position as he approached retirement. "The place has good bones," Watson assured them as he showed them around the partially restored main house. "Another year, and you won't recognize it." As promised, they visited the Denver ranch quarterly, each time finding it more closely resembling the prosperous property Kate remembered from her childhood. By the following spring, it was turning a modest profit, which they reinvested in both properties. It was after returning from one such trip, in May of 1878, that Kate shared the news she'd suspected for several weeks but had only recently confirmed with the doctor in Denver. "I'm with child," she told Brock as they sat on the porch swing one evening, watching the sunset paint the mountains in fiery hues. Brock's reaction was everything she could have hoped for: joy, wonder, and a tenderness that brought tears to her eyes as he knelt before her, his hand gently resting on her still flat stomach. "A baby," he whispered in awe. "Our baby. Due in November," Kate confirmed, covering his hand with her own. "Around our anniversary." The months of Kate's pregnancy passed in a blur of preparation and anticipation. Martha was ecstatic at the prospect of a baby in the house, knitting tiny garments and offering advice from her experience raising her own children and helping with numerous births in the community. Brock became endearingly protective, fretting over Kate's every move despite her assurances that pregnancy wasn't an illness. He insisted on hiring additional help for the house and ranch so Kate could rest more, ignoring her protests that she was perfectly capable of continuing most of her usual tasks. "Indulge me," he said when she accused him of hovering. "I've never been a father before. Let me fuss a bit." Kate relented, secretly touched by his concern. As her body changed and the baby grew, she found herself marveling at the journey that had brought her to this point, from the terrified woman chained in that barn to the contented wife and mother-to-be she had become. The contrast was sometimes so stark it brought her to tears, much to Brock's alarm. "Happy tears," she assured him when he found her crying while folding tiny baby clothes one afternoon. "I'm just grateful for you, for this life we've built." Brock gathered her in his arms, his hand resting on her rounded belly where their child grew. "I'm the grateful one," he murmured against her hair. "Every day I thank God for leading me to that barn." Their son, James William Daniels, was born on a snowy night in late November, after a difficult but ultimately uncomplicated labor. When the midwife placed the squalling, red-faced infant in Kate's arms, she looked up at Brock with an expression of such profound joy that he felt his heart might burst. "He's perfect," Brock whispered, gently touching his son's tiny hand. "Absolutely perfect." "He has your eyes," Kate observed as the baby blinked up at them. "And I think he'll have your stubborn chin too." Brock laughed softly. "Poor kid. Let's hope he gets your brains to compensate." Little Jamie, as they called him, thrived under the adoring attention of his parents and Martha, who appointed herself unofficial grandmother and chief baby spoiler. The boy had his father's dark hair and serious expression, but his mother's quick smile and curious nature. By his first birthday, Jamie was toddling determinedly around the ranch house, getting into everything and chattering in a language only he fully understood. Kate and Brock watched his development with equal parts pride and amazement, each seeing in their son the promise of a future brighter than either had dared imagine for themselves. The Denver ranch continued to prosper under Samuel Watson's management, providing a steady second income that allowed them to improve Crescent Moon and set aside funds for Jamie's education and future. They visited the property regularly, sometimes staying for weeks during the pleasant summer months, with Brock dividing his time between the two ranches. On one such visit in the summer of 1880, when Jamie was nearly 2, Kate received an unexpected visitor at the Denver house. She was in the garden with Jamie when Samuel announced that a woman was asking to see her. She wouldn't give her name, he explained apologetically. Just said it was important. Curious and slightly wary, Kate instructed Samuel to bring the visitor to the garden while she kept Jamie close. The woman who appeared moments later was in her 60s, gray-haired and dignified despite her plain clothing. It took Kate a moment to recognize Blackley's former housekeeper, Mary Sutton. "Mrs. Sutton?" Kate gasped in surprise, rising to her feet. "What are you doing here?" The older woman smiled nervously. "Forgive the intrusion, Mrs. Daniels. I've been trying to find you for some time. When I heard the Zimmer place was being restored and had new owners, I made inquiries. I'm glad to see you're well." Kate invited her to sit, offering tea while Jamie played nearby, occasionally casting curious glances at the stranger. "Is that your little one?" Mary asked, her eyes softening at the sight of the toddler. "Yes, that's James," Kate replied proudly. "Jamie, can you say hello to Mrs. Sutton?" The boy waved shyly before returning to his play with a wooden horse Brock had carved for him. "He's beautiful," Mary commented. "You've made a good life for yourself. I'm glad." "Thanks in part to you," Kate acknowledged. "Your kindness during that time. I never properly thanked you." Mary waved away her gratitude. "I did what anyone with a conscience would do. Which brings me to why I'm here." She reached into her handbag and withdrew a small packet of papers. "These are yours. I think you should have them." Kate accepted the packet cautiously, opening it to find several folded documents. As she scanned them, her breath caught. They were exactly what she had bluffed about records of Blackley's activities, including dates, names of young women he had acquired to settle debts, and what had ultimately happened to them. "You really did keep records," Kate whispered in astonishment. Mary nodded grimly. "For years. Never thought I'd have the courage to use them, but after you escaped, well, it gave me hope that something might be done." "Have you shown these to anyone else?" Kate asked, her mind racing with the implications. "No," Mary replied, "but I've made copies. If anything should happen to me, they'll find their way to the proper authorities." Kate carefully refolded the papers. "Why give these to me now?" Mary's expression hardened slightly. "Because he's coming back. Blackley. His business ventures in Nevada failed, and there are rumors he's returning to Colorado to rebuild his operations. I thought you should be prepared." Kate felt a chill despite the summer heat. "When?" "Within the month, from what I've heard." Mary glanced at Jamie, then back to Kate. "I don't think he'd risk coming after you again, not with these documents existing. But I thought you should know nonetheless." After Mary departed, Kate sat in the garden for a long time, watching Jamie play while turning over this new information in her mind. When Brock returned from inspecting the north pasture with Watson, she showed him the documents and relayed Mary's warning. "We'll return to Crescent Moon immediately," Brock decided, his protective instincts in full force. "It's more remote, safer. Running away won't solve anything," Kate countered thoughtfully. "If Blackley is truly returning to Colorado, he'll eventually learn we still have connections here. Besides," she tapped the packet of papers, "with these, we finally have real leverage." "What are you suggesting?" Brock asked, studying her determined expression. "That we use these documents to ensure Blackley never threatens anyone again, not us, not any other vulnerable women. We take them to the territorial governor. Brock considered her proposal carefully. It would mean publicly acknowledging what happened to you. Are you prepared for that? For the gossip, the judgment? Kate lifted her chin, her green eyes flashing with the quiet strength that had first captivated him. I've nothing to be ashamed of. I was a victim once. I won't be one again, and I won't let fear of gossip prevent me from doing what's right. Her courage moved him deeply. Then we'll do it together, he promised. Whatever comes, we face it as a family. The meeting with the territorial governor was arranged through Harold Jenkins, whose political connections proved invaluable. Governor Pitkin received them in his Denver office, listening gravely as Kate shared her story and presented Mary Sutton's meticulous records. These allegations are extremely serious, Pitkin said when she had finished, his expression troubled. Vernon Blackley has powerful friends, even now. So do we, Brock pointed out, his hand resting supportively on Kate's shoulder. And we have something Blackley doesn't, the truth. Pitkin nodded slowly. I'll have my legal advisors review these documents immediately. If they're authenticated, I can assure you action will be taken. True to his word, the governor moved quickly. Within a week, warrants were issued for Blackley's arrest on multiple charges of kidnapping, false imprisonment, and worse. When he arrived in Denver from Nevada, he was taken into custody immediately. The trial that followed was sensational, drawing attention from newspapers across the territory. Kate testified with dignity and composure, her clear, unwavering account of her captivity leaving many in the courtroom in tears. Other women came forward with similar stories, bolstered by Kate's courage and Mary Sutton's detailed records. Throughout the proceedings, Brock remained by Kate's side, a steady presence that gave her strength when painful memories threatened to overwhelm her. Jamie stayed at Crescent Moon with Martha, protected from the ugliness being exposed in the Denver courtroom. Vernon Blackley was convicted on all counts and sentenced to 20 years in the territorial prison. As he was led from the courtroom, he looked directly at Kate, his face contorted with hatred. She met his gaze steadily, refusing to be intimidated. It's over, Brock said as they left the courthouse for the last time. Really over? Kate nodded, feeling a weight lift that she hadn't realized she still carried. Yes, she agreed. Now we can truly move forward. They returned to Crescent Moon Ranch, to Jamie's excited welcome and the peaceful routine they had established. Life settled into a comfortable pattern once more, unmarred by the shadows of the past that had finally been laid to rest. In the spring of 1882, Kate gave birth to their second child, a daughter they named Elizabeth Martha Daniels, after both their mothers. With her mother's auburn hair and her father's quiet determination, little Lizzie completed their family circle. The years passed in a blend of ordinary days and special moments. Jamie grew into a thoughtful, responsible boy with his father's affinity for ranching and his mother's love of books. Lizzie developed into a spirited, independent girl who could ride as well as her brother and wasn't afraid to speak her mind. Both ranches thrived under the Daniels' careful management. When Samuel Watson retired, Jamie, by then 19, took over running the Denver property, showing a natural talent for the business side of ranching that impressed both his parents. On a warm evening in the summer of 1895, Kate and Brock sat on the porch of Crescent Moon Ranch, watching the sunset just as they had countless times over their nearly 20 years together. Lizzie, now 13, was helping Martha in the kitchen, while Jamie was in Denver with his new bride, managing the property that would one day be his. Do you ever think about that day? Kate asked softly, her hand finding Brock's in the gathering twilight. When you found me in that barn? Brock squeezed her hand gently. Sometimes, he admitted, though it seems like another lifetime now. Kate nodded, understanding perfectly. The young woman in chains and the frightened cowboy who had freed her seemed like different people connected to who they were now but transformed by the life they had built together. When you broke those chains and said never again, did you have any idea what you were starting? She asked, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Brock chuckled, pulling her closer on the swing. Not a clue. I just knew I couldn't leave you there. Best decision I ever made, not riding past that barn. For me too, Kate agreed, resting her head on his shoulder. For me too. As the last light faded from the sky and stars began to appear above the Colorado mountains, they sat together in contented silence, secure in the knowledge that some chains, once broken, led not to mere freedom but to a life of extraordinary love.